mission so easy. Never had a mission so easy.
Hey there. Today at Tiger Drop Films, I'm going to tell you why I find Resident Evil 6 to be the ultimate Resident Evil experience. So grab your green herbs and your favorite weapon, and let's get into it. Now, Resident Evil 6 is no stranger to already having a fan base backing it up, so that's why for this video I'm just going to give you my own perspective on this game. You see, last year I really delved into the Resident Evil series, from the first game all the way to Resident Evil 6, and that also includes Code Veronica and Revelations, games I've already talked about on this channel in my last 2 Resident Evil videos. However, with that being said, I was always familiar with Resident Evil as a franchise growing up, from other crossover video games to the Anderson films. Oh man, I remember watching the Retribution film as a kid and being exposed to Jill Valentine and Ada Wong. Oh, ruined my life in the best way, but here we are today. Resident Evil is the embodiment of so many film franchises I love. From Alien to Predator to Terminator and Evil Dead, among so many others. And playing so many of these games back to back really sold why I love action and horror. And I think action and horror are two ideas that are synonymous and can bleed into each other and vice versa. I mean, Resident Evil is a franchise that can go from being about zombies to warfare and to Jurassic Park. If that isn't versatile, then I don't know what is. Now, Resident Evil 6 happens to share the same writer as Resident Evil Damnation, my favorite animated film of the bunch, that writer being Shotaro Suga. And let me tell you, I really adore his writing. The characters just seem to be brought to life in such a new way that does come across as organic, and they also got a nice punch to them that I really like. And so you truly see that in Resident Evil 6. From the new characters to returning characters, they all seem so lively while also dealing with some kind of new struggle. And additionally, I really like how Resident Evil 6 is able to bring together so many factors from the franchise. And like I said, since I played a lot of these games during my free time last year, what I really appreciated of Resident Evil 6 was how it used fan service in all the right ways. Especially when considering that Resident Evil 6 combined the zombie era of the classic games with the more plaga-based enemies of 4 and 5, with the zombies in RE6, and then we had the Java, which basically function as your Ganados and Magini. There's even a shark and snake fight in this game. What a great homage to the first game. So it really becomes sort of a greatest hits of Resident Evil, while at the same time putting their own spin on these classic enemies. And what I mean is that it wasn't just to toggle your remember berries, no, it was a way of just showing why this franchise is so beloved, from Ustanak being a great Nemesis homage, to the kids of Wesker and Birkin being able to save the world, unlike their parents who tried to destroy it in some way. And damn it, Resident Evil 6 actually let us fly a jet as Chris Redfield. I mean, you gotta remember, Chris Redfield was once in the Air Force, so when I found out that while playing this game, Chris Redfield was able to fly a jet, it just, made me grin like an idiot. It was so awesome. It also happened to be a nice little callback to Code Veronica as well. And so if you see what I mean with these examples, I adore that Resident Evil 6's story is able to bring together so many cool aspects of the franchise. I mean, another example is how during Leon's campaign, you can come across an officer complaining about this being his first day on the job while there's a zombie outbreak going on. And across the street, there's even a Stagla gas station referencing Resident Evil 3. I mean, the fan service is everywhere, and it's done with such love and dignity. It doesn't make you roll your eyes. Instead, it makes you just grin like an idiot. At least that's what it did for me, and I really appreciated that. And speaking of grinning like an idiot, I adore this game's style. The purple text and the spider webs and the overall dreamy feel to the game. If I had to compare its art style to another game from the same year, well, it'd have to be Yakuza 5, one of my favorites of the Yakuza series. And if you're familiar with my channel, you know I love talking about Yakuza every chance I get. And speaking of Yakuza 5, I adored how RE6 is about 4 campaigns coming together as you unravel the spider web and finding out new details about the narrative. And when it comes to the narrative, I was genuinely surprised to see how much it actually challenged its characters. From Leon's main antagonist being the guy who ordered the bombing of Raccoon City, I mean, I did not expect that. And while its more so details are kind of in the background, being able to punch Simmons in the face is pretty satisfying if you followed Leon from his beginning to here. And when it comes to Chris Redfield, I really liked his journey of overcoming his amnesia and trauma and just trying to do the right thing. However, Piers being a sort of mirror of a young Chris, having to bring our Chris back to who he's supposed to be, was really endearing. And it's such a simple concept that I really gravitated towards. And of course, it ends with Chris having to fight another world-destroying foe in a crazy laboratory. I mean, if you followed Chris Redfield, I do think there's a nice little trilogy that pays off with Resident Evil 6. That being if you consider Revelations and how he helped build the BSAA, to RE5 being his climactic battle against Big Daddy Albert Wesker. Then here in RE6 he goes through a slight bit of a reset as he's now at his lowest point. But of course we get to see our boulder punching, peanut busting, loving Chris Redfield rise back to the top and take out House at the bottom of the sea, even if it tragically meant losing Piers. And I was really surprised to see that Piers sacrificed himself. It really made House seem like such a dangerous global threat. And I do think that having a protagonist die every now and then does kind of keep things fresh. And I'm glad that they did not kill off Chris Redfield. I know that was a plan for the game originally, and of course, I already saw memes and whatnot about RE7 and 8, so I knew Chris was going to come back. But when looking at this game in hindsight, as a guy who's really become such an avid Resident Evil fan, I really liked Chris Redfield's story. I thought it was engaging, and I just loved how the game's narrative did not diminish Chris at all as a character. If anything, Piers was such a great supporting character that he really was able to bring Chris back to life, back to who he's supposed to be. And of course, Roger Craig Smith's performance is stellar. And it made me a little sad that this was pretty much his last performance as Chris, besides the Marvel vs. Capcom games. Because his voice is just what I think of whenever I think about Chris Redfield. And when it comes to Jake and Sherry's campaign, I was pleasantly surprised to enjoy Jake so much. He's so charismatic and he really grows on you. He starts off as a bit of a stubborn jackass, only in it for the money, but even from the first chapter you get to slowly see bits of who he really is. A guy who's just forced to have been lonely after the death of his mother and being forced to live as a mercenary for so long. I mean, he's only like 21 in this game. The dynamic he has with Sherry is really enduring, and as you get to unravel their journey across the 6 months time skip in the campaign, I was really rooting for them to keep fighting on and surviving, whether it's Ustanak or the oncoming apocalypse, and coming to terms of who they are with their heritage as children of madmen who expose themselves to these dastardly bioweapons. And if I didn't already like Jake and Sherry's campaign enough, the fact that it ends with a charming love rock song completely won me over. And to be honest, the only truly big complaint I had of this game would have to come to the fact that I had to put on gloves to beat that one part in Jake's campaign where Ustanak is chasing you through all those goddamn doors. It was like a bad Scooby-Doo chase, and I've never had to put on gloves to beat a video game in my life. And yeah, that's pretty much the only roadblock I faced in this game. It's not as bad as, say, Code Veronica's way of not telling you when you have to switch characters and be sure to put, inventory in the item box. But in the case of Resident Evil 6, that was truly the only major critique I had, was that goddamn door section. Originally, I was going to critique the crosshairs in this game, the ones you start off with, but then I realized in options you can switch back to good old laser sight, which I thoroughly was happy about. Now I'd like to talk about Ada, probably one of my favorite Resident Evil characters, and if you're a guy, well, you know why. And all the women who are big fans of Resident Evil, they know why too. But what I love about Ada's first chapter is that it just opens up with her jumping out of that diving suit naked. It's the best kind of jump scare, a sexy scare. But the fact that this game really explores sort of who Ada would have become if she didn't have that good heart of hers. Because when it comes to Carla, she really is just what you would imagine an evil spy to be. Cold, calculating, and always has some sort of backup plan. And you gotta consider that all the bosses in the game came from Carla's scheming. Whether it was Chris having to fight House, who might have been the most destructive bioweapon in the series, should it have continued to grow, to Jake having to fight Usanak, who responded to Carla's commands, and it was clear she was one of the reasons he was developed, since she made the C virus in the first place, to Leon and Helena having to fight Simmons, who Carla infected personally due to Javo. And then when you come to Ada herself, Ada's the one that had to overcome Carla in that battleship fight. So it's pretty fascinating that when you look at all the Resident Evil villains, as I've talked about in another video before, and trying to create a villain that follows up on Albert Wesker himself, I do think that Carla's a worthy successor, because a lot of her plans almost succeeded, and she even took the whole bioweapon global war to another level, and it was almost became an apocalypse if you think about it. From the warheads containing the C virus, to battleships and entire armies full of Neo Umbrella Javo that can continue to evolve even when they take damage, to House sleeping at the bottom of the ocean waiting to awaken, and so many insane bioweapons of different sizes and abilities that can be deployed at any moment. I think that's what makes Resident Evil 6 terrifying in its own right. Sure, Resident Evil may creep out some people more than others, but for me, I think it just has a really genuine cool factor. And now I know that the whole survival horror aspect and the lack of RE6 having it is some kind of major criticism to the game. Even back in the day, from my research, it seems like there was some kind of mob mentality just ragging on the game, but I don't think that's a fair criticism when considering that not only are the characters that are returning so powerful at this point, but you have to do more to make bioweapons scary. Especially when considering that in the first place, Spencer and Umbrella were trying to make bioweapons. And when we get the RE6, we truly get to see bioweapons on a different scale that we only get hints of in the past. From RE5 and the new Plaga Outbreak, or Revelations and the Terra Grigia Attack, little bits that we get to see fully realized here in RE6, all over the world, from Adonia to the US to China, and secret underground laboratories. And whenever I look at Resident Evil 6's cutscenes and narrative, and the gameplay, one thing that truly stuck out to me is the bleakness to it. From Chris losing his team twice, to Leon and Helena being helpless to witness the warhead go off and infect so many innocent people that moments ago we just saw making their way to evacuation. It goes from melancholy to a terrible bleakness of something that cannot be stopped. I mean, for Pete's sake, if you look at the Tall Oaks attack alone, as the infection spreads, so many survivors get taken out. Especially the cathedral fight, where if you don't act fast enough, then pretty much every a random civilian in there can get infected. There's such a bleak feeling to the game as Carla expresses her rampage that when it comes to Ada finally taking her out, it feels so cathartic. And I love how the game juxtaposes Carla's ruthlessness to Ada's genuine humanity. Because whenever I see fans kind of label Ada as being heartless, I just don't think that's true. Sure, she's doing her job most of the time, but what makes Ada interesting is that she has such a good-natured part to her, that she does want to help people, and she'll even step out of line to do it, from saving Leon and RE4 and sticking it to Wesker, to what we see in this game where she tries to help the people on the rooftop and just get to the bottom of why her name is being misused by a doppelganger. And Ada Wong is a great example of why fans love femme fatale characters, because they're a great, strong case of strong, positive femininity, just like Catwoman is. And having the same writer from Damnation once again does pay off here, because I just love how many different layers are given to Ada. And man, Courtney Taylor's performance as Ada is incredible. I love how she also adds some small touches to Carla's voice too. But when it comes to Ada, I love how she performs her voice, the direction, just the sort of cadence she has to her. It's very spy-like and Catwoman-like, and it really does a nice job building off of Sally Cahill's performance. And I adore that a lot of Ada's lines in RE6 are repeated in Dead by Daylight whenever he plays Ada. It's such a cool touch to just see these lines brought back in some kind of modern game.
Wanna play, huh? Alright. Ready or not, here I come. Now, who's first?
As I said earlier, Resident Evil 6 truly tests the limits of all these beloved characters, and it's part of why I think this is such an ultimate Resident Evil experience, because you get so many callbacks reimagined in such a proficient way, and you actually get to see these characters confront parts of themselves that we haven't seen before. It truly felt like Resident Evil had a story that was building off, a story that already reached such a big climax in Resident Evil 5, and I love that RE6 is able to pick up the pieces and continue telling a story of other parts of the franchise that were overlooked, such as the corruption of the US government. And we get to see that as Leon gets to fight Simmons head on after being forced to kill the president. And the way that Simmons not only challenges the whole US corruption causing most of the events of this franchise, I like that he also serves as a way to challenge Leon's commitment to Ada. Because of course we know the romance between Leon and Ada is strong, since they both pretty much saved each other back in Raccoon City. And it's also kind of a nice parallel we see of Jake and Sherry, but the fact that Simmons is such an antagonistic force that directly tries to hurt Ada and Leon has to save her, I just found it really touching. It's a sort of emotional pull that I was really happy this game touched upon. And I think if Resident Evil tried to do more of that, it'd be for the better. Because I feel like Resident Evil 6 really challenged the characters. From Leon and Ada fighting for each other, to Jake and Shuri finding solace and both of them being these outliers, to Chris becoming a hero again with the help of peers. I just think there's so many elements in the story that, well, sure, a lot of it is still told through text that you have to find, and let me quickly talk about that. Although I was a little bit disappointed that you can't just go up to an environment and hit a button and the character will kind of remark about something like past games, I do enjoy now having a different incentive, as in looking around the environment to find those serpent emblems, to learn more about different subtle details in the story. I think it's a nice way to kind of update old systems in Resident Evil while still giving us an incentive to explore the environment. Because I do think that every Resident Evil game still has quite a bit of its plot told through text and files and what have you. But whenever Resident Evil 6 does dive into the cutscenes and the heart of the story, I think it excels on all fronts. Sure, the overall concept of the narrative may not be the best, but I think that a lot of stories can still excel even if the whole plot idea isn't strong, because it's the character interactions that really pull through and keep me engaged. As with Yakuza 5, and I'm bringing up Yakuza 5 again because just like RE6, both of these games have a bit of a mixed overall story narrative, but the character interactions are so good and they build off of previous lore that I really just adore being able to jump back into these universes that I love, these games and their unique characters. And yeah, I think Resident Evil 6 does a stupendous job just making these characters feel alive, even if their own pitfalls, and seeing them rise to the top and becoming, well, better people. I mean, isn't that what survival horror is all about? Overcoming this great opposing terrible force and becoming a better person due to it? Facing your fears and growing because of it? Well, I think so. And with that in mind, I think Resident Evil 6 is no stranger to, well, being a Resident Evil game, because it is a Resident Evil game. There's no doubt about that. It has everything Resident Evil that I love. Insane action, creative looking monsters, and bioweapons, and characters that I love, that they're over the top in a great way, because I'd rather characters be a little over the top and endearing and charismatic instead of being bogged down by realism and just ridiculous and being just too, well, realistic and boring. And that's why I'm happy to say that I love Resident Evil 6, because it just feels like such a great ode to the franchise. The characters are bombastic, they go to incredible looking settings, and they have to engage with so many different adversities. And like I said earlier, I played pretty much all these games in a year, and when I came across RE6 and I had to fight that snake and shark again, I mean, it felt like a great culmination to this journey. And while I do look forward to playing the games that came after this, I just have this gut feeling that this was a true height of the franchise, as the characters grew in some way, and I just really, really wish that people didn't jump on a hate bandwagon, because it's never cool to do that unless it's actually warranted. And in the case of RE6, I just don't see that being warranted. It feels like a Resident Evil game, and that's why I just had such a great time with it. The gameplay is fluid, it builds off the previous games. There's even some nice callbacks to the fixed camera, as I'll show you right here.
Try to be quicker. Try to be quicker. That wasn't bad. That wasn't bad. Don't get cocky. Appreciate it.
A lot of things feel deliberate, is what I'm trying to get across. And I love that it just becomes such a beat 'em up arcade game. It's fun. I mean, goddamn, I like video games that are fun. RE6 feels like a product of its time in the best way. A time that I really miss, and I hope video games go back to it. An era that I fondly remember with games such as Transformers War and Fall for Cybertron, the Batman Arkham series, and Star Wars Force Unleashed. Games like that just go so hard when they have no business to, but except to be fun and genuinely enjoyable. If I had to close out Resident Evil 6 in some way, well, I think Leon and Ada's campaign has the best way of doing it. And Leon's ends with Helena giving Leon Ada's makeup case, and the fact that Leon says women with a smile in regards to Ada, it's so charming, and I think it's a great way of just making a callback work in such a new light. And I think that just really describes Resident Evil, that final women line. Just a game that kicks ass, is charismatic, has style and soul. A game that wasn't afraid to take some risks and just give people what they wanted, even if they seemed like they didn't want it for some reason. And although Resident Evil is a franchise that's always going to evolve, and I think it's a good thing, I think that Resident Evil 6 is the ultimate showcase as to why Resident Evil is always going to go back to action in some form. The franchise just can't escape being bombastic, fun, but also having some really creepy imagery to it. And I believe that writer Shitaro Suga truly understood that, and he delivered with his Resident Evil projects. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. And if you didn't like this video, then well, let me know in the comments below, because I just love reading feedback, whatever it is. So again, thank you for watching. I hope you stick around, and please, if you do, stay tuned, because I've got more coming.
What took you so long? What took you so long? I guess that was good. I guess that was good. I guess that was good. Don't die on me. That a mission so easy.